Hello and welcome to RC Projects. It's time for episode 4 of the Monster Project, and today we're going to be sorting out the suspension on my Tamiya Lunchbox. The stock suspension is pretty poor. It doesn't help the ride of the car at all. So we'll be fitting some new shock absorbers by Fastrax here. I've got the three sizes, 75, 85 and 95mm. So obviously a bigger shock on the back and a smaller shock on the front, just to sort out that camber issue that it had. And in a minute I'm going to be telling you about the 5th shock mod that I did a week ago. You can see it there. So I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you about my new body mounts. You can see them there. The old ones, I've got them in a bin here. I actually broke 2 of them off during the last running video. You can see that one there. And the other one completely sheared in half. And these are just plastic anyway, so I'd expect them to break. So I've upgraded them to some black aluminium ones. They should be a lot stronger and a lot more durable. So now I'm going to tell you about this 5th shock mod. So the very first thing I did with this 5th shock mod is actually sort out the shock. Now this is the standard one that came in the pack. That one there. It's a 55mm shock from Fastrax, and I'm using the same shock type that I'm using for the rest of the suspension from Fastrax. And this is how it comes in the pack. It comes with a small ball joint at the bottom and a big one at the top, and it's got a bigger surface to mount to a flat surface, that bit there. And it came with a standard black spring, and it's got oil in it already, but the oil is pretty terrible. So, knocking everything. This is what I changed it to. I've got a Tamiya spring there, standard spring that comes in any ready to run kit. Put some preload clips there and swapped the bottom. I don't know what you call that. I'll call it. I don't know what that bit there. That eye. I swapped that for a smaller one so it would fit through the that tube there, and that runs along the axle there in that tube there. And I made sure that this was a tight fit. Just there, so there's no rattling or anything. And swap the bottom ball joint to go into the top there. So that's how I set up the spring and the shock. And it's got some 80 weight oil in there, so it's really stiff. So there's not much give in it. Moving on. The second thing I did was cut out this part of the rear axle here to actually fit the shock into, like that. Now this is going to be personal preference to everyone wherever you do it, but I try to get as central as possible. And obviously this is where the join happens, so I just took the axle apart and just cut this little L section out here. It doesn't matter cutting into here because this space in here is actually separate to the gearbox, and the gear's in the back, so no dirt's going to get into the gearbox if you end up cutting this bit out. So yeah, that's what I did, and if I can show you this on camera, yeah, you can see everything. So this is the tube that runs through this part here. I'll quickly show you. You can see that tube runs through there. So the idea is you put the shock into there, then put this metal tube through, feed it through the mount of the shock. It's quite tricky because it's quite a tight fit. There you go. And that holds it in place just there, like that. So I used a little sort of Dremel tool just to cut this L section part out. But it's always best to measure it and then cut a little bit smaller, and then you can use a file or sanding paper just to get it down to the right size. So that's the very first thing I did after setting up the shock. After you've sorted out the shock mounting to the rear axle, you're going to want to mount it to the chassis. So to do this, I obviously set this all up. It's not properly attached in, but it's good enough. So you've got the shock here, and you want to get this axle as far up in this mounting as possible, so you can see it's touching both of the tops of the mount there. And you want to bend this down, get it as straight as possible in the vertical position. You're going to just place this here and make a mark to roughly where it's going to go, drill a hole, and that's it. And then you just get a sort of a self-tapper screw, and you just screw it into the plastic, and that's the mount done. It just sits there. So you can see there I've actually attached the this bracket here, and all I'm using to attach the shock to it, the top of the shock, is a screw and a nut there. Again, these spares did come in the kit, but you may have to buy a few more just to do this mod. Luckily I had my sister's Lunchbox kit still around with all the spare parts, so I just nabbed some from there. So place the nut in there. Kind of awkward to work in this small area, but it will improve the suspension massively. So just screw that in. Tighten it up. Done. So you can see it there. Just exactly how it fits. Looks really cool as well. I went for the chrome spring because it matched the shock body a lot better. But yeah, that should help suspension massively. If you've got any questions, leave them down in the comments below and I'll try and answer them. But there's loads of tutorials on YouTube by other people, so just have a look for it. Yeah, that's my 5th shock mod on my Lunchbox. So now we're going to move on to the rear suspension and fit the new shocks. This is the shock I'm using from Fastrax 85mm. So I'm going to remove, doesn't need that anymore, but you need to keep this spacer here, because it's actually got a step up, so the spring fits in it, and then this actually fits against the shock body, so the shock doesn't come shooting off. So we don't need that anymore. And this is the shock without the spring. I don't know whether you can hear that, but the oil in it is pretty poor, as it's very soft, and I want to change that out, so we'll do that now. I'll just quickly open the cap for you here. Make sure you've got some paper towel around, so you can pour the oil onto it. Got all over my hands. But take this cap off. There you go. If I pull this down, you can see it's all milky and horrible in there. That's actually air in the system, and that's not helping the suspension at all. So I'm going to remove all that now, just pour that out on there. You can see it's all milky and horrible. It's got loads of air in it, so best to get that out of there. So that's going to prevent the dampening of the system. So you want to get some nice, I'm using factory team oil here, 80 weight, so a stiff sort of oil for the back. I use the same in the 5th shock as well. So you make sure you get all that bad oil out. Put some new in there. So I shall get rid of all that oil and now show you the next step. So you just want to get as much of that in as you can. Keep going so it's near the top, and then just leave it. And then all you want to do is cycle the shock really slowly. So just bring it up to the top, get a bit closer, just really slowly. And you want to cycle it back down again. You can see all the air comes out there. So you want to get rid of all the air, or as much of the air as you can, from the reservoir. See another air bubble there coming out. So cycle it really slowly just to get all the air out, and then you'll have a really nice smooth shock. So that's at the bottom now. So you can leave that to sit there for a while, but that's pretty good. You can see one air bubble coming up there, it just popped. So that's really clear now, you can see all the way to the bottom. So that's nice fluid in the shock there. So I'm going to cycle it a few more times, get all the air out, and then we'll move on to the next step. So now that all the air's out the shock key, you can hear it. That's me doing it as hard as I can. So it's quite a stiff shock for the rear, and there's no noise at all, no air moving around in there. So it's a really smooth, nice shock. So that's that done there. So the next step is to get rid of these ball joints here. So what I'm going to do is just use this anchor here. This is quite difficult, and you may have to do it off camera. The bottom one's easier to do. I'm going to transfer this one to the top and just replace the mount at the bottom. It's quite difficult to do. yeah, I'm gonna do this off camera, but basically you just want to get this eye out, this ball joint out of the mount there. So I'm going to try and get that out now. It's a bit tough, but I'll get there eventually. So this is what comes out. Don't need this one. This is the bigger size one that actually doesn't fit in the U mount that comes with the kit that I'm going to use. So I've got this little one here. I'm just going to put this one in the top. Get rid of any oil that's around there. So got the ball joint there. Place it in there. Get a pair of pliers. It just clips in like that. So you can see that there. The next thing is to replace this, because how I'm mounting it to the bottom of the axle here. Just going to bring this in. You can see that there, and that is too big, so it's obviously not going to fit onto there. So I need a smaller diameter hole. I had it around here somewhere. So I'm going to use one of these. These are off some ancient shocks, probably off the rally projects at some point. So to get rid of this, now you want to try and not get the this shaft here scratched, otherwise oil is going to escape from the shock. So get a paper towel, place the shock there, and then just undo this bottom. I don't know what you call them actually. Rod ends, eyes, I'm not sure. Unscrew that one. It's not going, not very professional, but don't really matter. Unscrew that one. Like that, don't need that one, and just fit the new one. If it's a new one, it will take a bit more effort to get it on because it hasn't already got a thread in it. That one went on quite easy. So you just want to screw that on, not too tight, otherwise you'll end up pushing the screw through the actual eye there. I've done that a few times. So just want to tighten it on, and then about done there. So that's that eye in there. So final thing to do is to add this spacer here that we retained. I'm actually using, I've got 3 sets of shocks and I'm using one from another one of those to go onto the bottom of the shock there. Do that. Then put this spring retainer on the bottom like that. So actually got, because this one is a bit bigger, a bit fatter than that one, so I've had to use a different spring retainer bottom bit there. So I had to use that spacer there from another set of shocks I've got. But a much stiffer spring. I can also always add preload clips at the top here to stiffen it even more with some nice stiff oil in there. So that's another shock ready to use for the rear. So got those two ready to go. So we shall fit them to the Lunchbox now. First thing to do is to press this onto the ball joint at the bottom, like that, and then mount it to this top, just there. So I'm going to put the screw on the outside and the nut on the inside, just using a longer style screw and nut there. Pushes through. There you go, start it off, and then tighten it down like that. Done. 2 rear springs on the back there, really nice, really stiff, really firm, awesome. See it there, this shock down there. So yeah, really looks really good. So now I shall move on to the front. Now the front shocks, you can see these here, these are the 75mm shocks. I've replaced the oil inside for 40 weight oil, so it's slightly softer, but put the same spring on because it looks cool, nice chrome spring. And I've got the same ball joints on the top and bottom. It's there, and there, and there, rather than the big one on the top and the little one on the bottom. So I've done that to both. All shocks are ready to go. And also, I did this off camera as well, but I've added a front brace. Now this is made out of aluminium. I think it's about 1 mil thick. Aluminium brace, you can see there, slight bend in both sides. 2 holes drilled through, and then there's a bolt going through the shock mount bracket there. Bolt going through. Got the plate, the aluminium plate. You got a washer, and then the bolt. You just tightened up. So that's to prevent these front shock towers from bending, because they're really flexible when from stock, but with this plate they're absolutely solid, not going to bend at all, not going to snap off. So yeah, just quickly did that. Wanted to do it off camera because it's sort of another modification like the 5th shock mod, and it'll take a while just to get it right. So yeah, easy enough to do yourself. So now I'm just going to fit the front shocks, and then we can put the wheels back on. It'll be ready to go. So that's the first round of upgrades done on the Monster project. We've got the 5th shock in the back there. We've got the rear shocks all nice and neat there, and front shocks with the front shock mount brace. So that's all of those upgrades, modifications done. Next should be the motor, and then that might be it for upgrades really for the Lunchbox. These new shocks should help with the handling and suspension, and also the durability of the RC. So yeah, and it's also sort of fixed that front camber issue as well. I may change the springs and make them a bit less stiff, so it actually sits a bit lower, so they sit a bit flatter. But yeah, super happy with them, look really good, and can't wait to take it out again. So thanks for watching episode 4 of the Monster Project, and I shall see you next time on RC Projects.